6 disturbing unsolved mysteries in New Jersey that will leave you baffled. New Jersey may be small, but we pack a lot of strange stuff into our state. We have loads of lore and many myths about miniature villages and portals to hell. If you're a fan of the supernatural, New Jersey has a lot to offer. However, if you are more interested in real-life mysteries, we have plenty of them too. Think you can solve those creepy crimes and strange disappearances? No one has for decades.
1. The Lindbergh Kidnapping. Charles Lindbergh is an American aviation legend. At the height of his career, he was handsome, breaking records, and he was beloved like a comic book superhero. History has remembered him as such, but history has also remembered him as something else, something heartbreaking. He was the father of a boy who was not even 2 years old when he was stolen from his family and murdered. Charles and his wife Anne endured months of ransom notes and searching for their child, only to find that he had probably been dead before they even realized he was missing. It was the story of a generation. It created a media frenzy that drove the Lindberghs from the United States. Most of all, it was horribly sad. On the night of March 1, 1932, the Lindbergh family was relaxing in their Hopewell, New Jersey home. Charles Lindbergh Jr. was tucked away in his crib and the rest of the household was going about their business as usual. At around 10 o'clock, the Lindbergh's nanny went to check on her charge. He was not in his room. She informed the baby's parents immediately. A search was conducted and the police were informed. The child was not in the house. It is though that the kidnappers stole him from his room around 9 p.m. A note asking for $50,000 in ransom money was on the windowsill of the room. When police arrived to conduct their investigation, they found several clues, but none of them would prove helpful until years later. There was mud on the floor of Charles Lindbergh Jr.'s room, presumably dragged in on the kidnappers' shoes. Also found were the remains of a broken ladder, which the kidnapper probably used to reach the boy's window. Police found footprints below the window, but none was clear enough for forensic use. There was no indication that the kidnapper hurt Charles Lindbergh Jr. inside of the home. Police spoke with household workers and people close to the Lindbergh family. There were no leads to be found. All they had to go on was the ransom note and the 12 others that followed. Charles Lindbergh got the second ransom letter on March 6. It stated that the amount required was now $70,000. A third note arrived 2 days later, stating the correspondence would now go through the newspaper. Negotiations for payment of ransom began the next day. Several more ransom notes followed, all handled through an agreed-upon intermediary. The kidnappers produced the child's sleepwear as proof that they had Charles Jr. After a series of more exasperating communications, the amount was increased to $100,000. Eventually, $50,000 was turned over to a man with the alias John in exchange for information on Charles Lindbergh Jr.'s whereabouts. The information was false. The area was searched several times. The child was not there. John lied and ran with the money. More than 1 month later, a motorist found Charles Lindbergh Jr.'s body on the side of the road less than 5 miles from the Lindbergh residence. The baby suffered massive head injuries. His tiny body was marked with animal bite wounds and it was decaying rapidly. An autopsy showed that the kidnapper killed Charles Jr. right after he stole him. It is possible that the kidnapper accidentally dropped the baby when exiting the house. By today's standards, that is still murder. The investigation continued, this time in an effort to catch the person, or persons who had stolen Charles and Anne Lindbergh's son, murdered him and then extorted money from his grieving parents. There were numerous false leads and claims. Police sifted through these whilst trying to find the money used to pay the killer or killers. It was years before investigators finally got a worthwhile lead. On August 20, 1934, some of the gold certificates used as ransom turned up in New York. These certificates eventually led back to Bruno Hauptmann, who fit the description of John. The police searched his house and found $13,000 of the ransom money, the same type of wood used to make the ladder. The intermediary's contact information and goods paid for with ransom money. Later, his handwriting was compared with that on the ransom notes. It matched. Bruno's case did not look good, but he denied everything. Hauptmann was brought to trial on January 3, 1935. Charles Lindbergh was there every day of the 5-week trial. It must have wreaked havoc on him and his wife. In fact, after the trial, they could no longer bear to live in the United States, where the press hounded them and their loss haunted them. It did not matter that Hauptmann was found guilty and executed, they would never find peace. Conspiracy theorists posited the possibility that Hauptmann was framed. Crime buffs stated, correctly, that Hauptmann was convicted on circumstantial evidence that left a shadow of a doubt. The fact is that the evidence against Bruno was convincing. If he was framed, it was an elaborate frame-up. Either way, the Lindbergh baby was denied a long life because someone sought the wealth of his parents.
2. The disappearance of Gary Grant Jr. at Teachers' Conference on Thursday, January 12, 1984 gave 7-year-old Gary L. Grant Jr. of Atlantic City, New Jersey the day off school. At breakfast, he mentioned to his mother May that he had an appointment at 2:30 p.m., the details of which were secret. Around noon, he went outside to play, saying he'd be back by 4 p.m. When he failed to return, his mother began to worry. She went to the house where 2 of Gary's friends lived, and they said that Gary had been there but left to go home around 4:30 p.m. After 2 hours had passed, May called her husband Gary L. Grant Sr., a police detective. Gary Sr. took the night off work and searched the area fruitlessly until around 1 or 2 a.m. By Friday morning, the police were searching for Gary. Gary Sr. was prevented from joining the official search due to regulations, so he began investigating independently. During his investigation, he met several people who remembered seeing Gary early that morning. A man named Robert Huggy realized that the disappearance was near a warehouse he owned, and searched the property. At 3:30 p.m. on Saturday, he discovered Gary's body in a vacant lot near the warehouse, less than 2 blocks from his home. Police noted that he had been bludgeoned to death and that a length of pipe was near his body. Around the same time, Gary Sr. came upon the scene and had to be restrained when he realized what happened. Nearly 2 years later, on January 4, 1986, a message on the side of a police car was discovered around 3 o'clock a.m. The message read, "Gary Grant is dead. I am living. Another will die on the January 12, 1986 if all goes right." The date inscribed was the 2nd anniversary of Gary's murder. A few weeks later, another message was found scratched onto a sidewalk, reading, "Gary Grant Jr. lives. I still killed him. Son of a pig officer. Payback is AMF." This message led to the belief that Gary was killed as revenge against his father, possibly by someone he arrested. Suspects. On the day that Gary's body was found, investigators began questioning people in the area. One person mentioned seeing Gary on Thursday near the local middle school with Carl Boo Mason, a developmentally disabled 12-year-old friend. When questioned, Carl said he last saw Gary on Wednesday when they rode their bikes at Texas Avenue Park. The two had planned to meet on Thursday, but Gary never showed up. Many people that detectives questioned said Carl and Gary had met on Thursday. By midnight, Carl, accompanied by his grandmother, was taken to police headquarters. He was separated from his grandmother and questioned. His responses were inconsistent and his recollection frequently changed. Around 3 o'clock a.m., Carl said he had not only been with Gary at the crime scene but that he had hit him, leaving when Gary fell and didn't stand up again. Police felt Carl knew things only the killer would know and typed up a confession for him and his grandmother to sign. Though he insisted he hadn't murdered Gary, Carl signed the confession, believing he would get to go home if he did. Carl was charged with murder and moved to a juvenile detention center. On Sunday, January 15th, Carl was given a polygraph exam, which yielded inconclusive results. A second exam was given on January 18th. Both tests agreed that Carl was telling the truth about not killing Gary, but doubted that he was telling the truth about not being at the crime scene. A month after Carl's arrest, a hearing determined that Carl's confession was not admissible evidence, as none of the statements were made voluntarily. The charges against Carl were dropped. Gary Sr. believes Carl's older brother, who was arrested on robbery charges days before Gary's murder, may have tried to force Gary into taking part in a scheme where he used children to rob houses. In such a situation, Gary, the son of a police officer, would likely refuse and instead try to inform the police, which could have led to his murder as an attempt to silence him. 3. The murder of Sigrid Stevenson. Does the ghost of Sigrid Stevenson still haunt Kendall Hall? According to rumors at what is now the College of New Jersey, yes, it does. The murder of 25-year-old graduate student Stevenson happened just as classes were gearing up in fall 1977. The campus was already abuzz due to stories of the Son of Sam terrorizing nearby New York City, but when the murder was in one of the university's buildings, that brought the terror home. Shortly before midnight on Sunday, September 4th, a campus police officer noticed a bicycle that had been left chained up near Kendall Hall. All of the building's external doors were locked, and the last people said to have used the facility was a group of actors and theater crew members. One theory supposes Stevenson had attended that performance, and stayed behind by herself to practice on the building's piano. Again, though, that's just one theory. When the officer entered Kendall Hall that night, he spotted a blood trail on the stage that led to the piano. He lifted the instrument's dust cover and found Sigrid's lifeless body stashed beneath it. She had been stripped naked and tied up, her head and facial features so badly bludgeoned that a professor could only identify Stevenson by her hair color. Police found no sign of robbery. The medical examiner found no evidence of sexual assault, and determined that Stevenson died of a fractured skull, compounded by profuse bleeding. Although they lacked modern tools such as DNA testing, investigators questioned more than 100 individuals in their pursuit of justice. Among those interrogated, dozens took lie detector tests, including at least one campus police officer. Divers scoured the local lake in hope of finding a murder weapon. Nothing turned up. Authorities reportedly even brought in a psychic to zero effect. No leads, let alone conclusions, emerged, not then in 1977 and still, 39 years later, not now. Police have never even been able to name a single suspect. Click here to see a photograph of Stevenson. All that persists is the rumor of Sigrid Stevenson's ghost in Kendall Hall, along with the tragic questions of her loved ones that remain unanswered. 4. Missing atomic bombs off the Atlantic City coast. The 50s were an era of unbridled nuclear proliferation. Fears of a potential nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union were rampant. Basement and backyard bomb shelters were in vogue. Air raid drills became as commonplace as fire drills in the schools. Within this tense atmosphere of nuclear confrontation, the United States and Soviet Union each strove to outdo the other side by producing and deploying larger numbers of increasingly more powerful nuclear weapons, for a variety of military purposes. With an ever-increasing number of nuclear weapons in circulation around the globe, accidents were bound to happen. Within the United States, accidents of this type were referred to as broken arrow incidents. An incident of this type involving the loss of 2 atomic bombs occurred off the coast of New Jersey on July 28, 1957. On that day, an Air Force C-124 Globemaster transport aircraft took off from a base in Delaware on a routine flight to Europe. Its cargo consisted of 3 nuclear bombs plus 1 nuclear core. The flight would be anything but routine. The worldwide transportation of nuclear bombs by the Air Force's Strategic Air Command, SAC, was a major activity during the 50s. At that time, SAC operated 4 strategic support squadrons dedicated to the nuclear transportation role. The squadrons carried bombs, bomb components and other essential items required by SAC's growing worldwide bomber fleet deployed at bases located across the United States, Europe, North Africa and Asia. These squadrons were equipped with the Douglas C-124 Globemaster II a plane which airmen nicknamed Old Shaky. The Globemaster was at one time the world's largest military transport aircraft. Its double-deck fuselage measured roughly 130 feet in length. It had a wingspan of nearly 175 feet, and weighed 175,000 pounds. Powered by four 3,500 horsepower Pratt & Whitney piston engines, the gigantic aircraft could cover a distance of 2,300 miles at a leisurely cruising speed of 246 miles per hour. On that warm July day, the bomb-laden C-124 departed from Delaware's Dover Air Force Base bound for Europe on the first leg of its ill-fated transoceanic flight. Its precise route and destination remain unknown. Designed to carry large and heavy payloads, and not for speed, the C-124's flight over the Atlantic Ocean could have required 10 or 12 hours to complete. This trip, however, was to be different. Exactly what went wrong aboard the huge transport remains unknown. What is known is that within a relatively short time following its departure from Delaware, the C-124 was in serious trouble. The cause might have been an in-flight fire, a problem with the fuel supply or some other serious mechanical mishap. Regardless of the cause, the immediate and devastating result was that two of the aircraft's four engines had to be shut down. Only the two remaining Pratt & Whitney engines advanced to their maximum power settings, preventing the huge plane from rapidly losing height and crashing into the sea. Nevertheless, the crew of the aircraft could not maintain a level altitude. The two remaining engines simply could not support the massive weight of the aircraft and its cargo, and the big C-124 began descending toward the ocean below. Under the best of circumstances, the loss of two engines would have been considered a major in-flight emergency. For an aircraft heavily laden with a full load of fuel and a cargo of nuclear bombs, it was a potential disaster. Although there was never any danger of an accidental nuclear detonation, the aircraft, its flight crew and its highly classified cargo were now all at risk. The only solution was to land the aircraft as quickly as possible. At this point in the flight, the coast of New Jersey was the closest landfall. The nearest suitable airfield was the Navy's Atlantic City Naval Air Station. A secure military base equipped with long runways capable of handling jet fighters. The Atlantic City base offered hope to the crew of the big transport, and a direct course to the Navy's base was quickly plotted. Unfortunately, the aircraft's rate of descent was too rapid to enable it to reach the shore. As the C-124 droned onward toward the New Jersey coast with its remaining engines pushed to their maximum limits, the aircraft continued to lose altitude. The idea of ditching the aircraft, making an emergency crash landing in the ocean, was not well regarded. It was far too likely that the giant transport would be torn to pieces by the impact. The flight crew might not have survived the ditching, and the classified cargo would have almost certainly been lost, when the aircraft, or what was left of it, filled with water and sank to the bottom. The flight crew's only hope lay in reaching the Atlantic City Naval Air Station. Yet this possibility appeared more and more uncertain as the aircraft continued to lose height, dropping inexorably toward the ocean below. One way to reduce or halt the aircraft's descent was to lighten it. Excess fuel, no longer needed for a long transoceanic flight, was probably dumped. Non-essential cargo may have been pitched out of the aircraft. These measures were inadequate, and the rapidly unfolding mid-air crisis now reached a more urgent state. The weight of the aircraft had to be reduced, immediately, to prevent it from crashing into the sea. Only one drastic solution remained. The aircraft's cargo would have to be jettisoned. Its nuclear bombs would have to go. A key design feature of early nuclear bombs made this option somewhat more acceptable. Unlike more modern nuclear bombs, the first generation of atomic bombs featured a removable nuclear core. This core contained the bomb's nuclear components, including, typically, uranium and plutonium. The removable core technique ensured that such weapons remained one-point safe and incapable of an accidental nuclear detonation. Under normal operating conditions aboard SAX bombers, The cores remained separated from the bombs. They would only be inserted during flight, prior to dropping a weapon in wartime. Until the core was inserted, a weapon of this type was unarmed and safe. It was essentially just an empty bomb casing. The 3 atomic bombs carried aboard the stricken C-124 lacked their nuclear cores. In this condition, they posed no particular threat in the event that they had to be jettisoned. However, each bomb did contain a substantial amount of high-explosive material. This was needed to compress the nuclear core and thereby initiate the nuclear reaction. It was uncertain whether these high-explosive components might detonate when the bombs hit the water. The first bomb was pushed overboard at an altitude of only 2,500 feet above the sea. The bomb fell into the gray-green waters of the Atlantic Ocean roughly 100 miles from Atlantic City. There was no visible explosion as the bomb hit the water and it quickly vanished from sight. The second bomb was jettisoned in the same manner. Again, there was no observable detonation of the high-explosive elements. The combined weight of the 2 jettisoned bombs probably amounted to roughly 3 tons. Having shed some 6,000 pounds of excess weight, the C-124 was now able to maintain its altitude as it labored toward the New Jersey coast and safety. The third remaining bomb in the 1 nuclear core remained on board. Despite the loss of 2 engines and the severe handling difficulties this must have created, the crew managed to land the huge aircraft at the Atlantic City Naval Air Station without incident. Their heroic efforts saved both the big aircraft and a portion of its atomic cargo during this harrowing incident. Although the C-124 landed safely, the fate of the 2 lost nuclear bombs remains shrouded in mystery. Although the missing bombs lacked their nuclear cores, they were still regarded as highly classified devices. Soon after the incident, efforts to recover the bombs were made. Published reports suggested that these efforts were unsuccessful. What was the ultimate fate of the 2 lost atomic bombs? Did they simply disintegrate when they slammed into the ocean? Were fragments of one or both bombs eventually located and recovered? Or do they still lie somewhere on the ocean floor, silent and rusting artifacts of the Cold War? We may never know. 5. The disappearance of William Ebenezer Jones III. 55 years ago, William Billy Jones, clad in a snowsuit as he played with his younger sister Jill outside his family's New Jersey home, vanished in an instant, setting off a half-century search that remains alive to this day. Federal and local authorities are now seeking the public's help for new leads in the cold case that has spanned 3 generations of investigators from the Vineland Police Department and has garnered FBI interest since Jones, who would now be 53 years old, could theoretically be anywhere in the country, if not the world. Because nobody was ever found, Jill Jones, who has spent a lifetime wondering what became of her big brother, believes he may have been snatched by adults who raised him as their own. We're just trying to find out if anyone has any information regarding his whereabouts or if anyone might know who may have been involved in his disappearance, FBI Special Agent John Misiska told FoxNews.com. Back then, he was last seen wearing a snowsuit. What we're trying to do is get the word out and develop any new leads and resolve the case in any way we can. At the time of his disappearance on December 17, 1962, William Ebenezer Jones Jr. was 3 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 35 pounds. He had a vaccination scar on the back of his left arm that resembled a giraffe and was last seen wearing a light blue-gray snowsuit with a navy collar and silver buttons. He also reportedly had a dime in his pocket that was given to him by his mother Evelyn, who, like Billy's father, has since died. There's not a lot of the family left, Misiska said. That has also impacted the investigation. Only his sister remains. Jill Jones, who was with her older brother in the front yard at the time of his disappearance, said she remains hopeful her big brother will one day be found alive. "It's a gut feeling for me, I know he's still alive," she told FoxNews.com. "There's never been a body found, never been anything found. I don't believe he's dead." Jones, 52, surmises her brother was snatched by someone looking to replace a lost or deceased child. "I really believe that," she continued. I don't think he was murdered. I really believe someone lost a child and they took Billy to replace him. 3 decades ago, a distraught and dejected Jones sought the help of a hypnotist in an attempt to unlock memories of that fateful afternoon. It brought back feelings and a little bit of memories, said Jones, adding that her brother had a special bond with their dog, Baby Cakes. That was his pup, she said. He loved that dog. Jones' disappearance reportedly led to hundreds of volunteers scouring the family's Vineland neighborhood and included units from the New Jersey National Guard. Investigators also excavated grounds near an abandoned automobile dump, but that search was also fruitless. In 2009, Vineland Police Department Christian Kirkner, who was not yet born when Jones disappeared, reportedly reopened the case, which is believed to be the longest unsolved case of a missing child under 5 years old in the state. Kirkner could not be reached for comment. Jones, meanwhile, remains hopeful that this holiday season is the last one she'll endure without her big brother. I do believe he's still out there, I just don't know how to find him, she told FoxNews.com. Maybe this is the year. 6. The missing hide of the Morristown murderer. After being tried, convicted and executed for the triple murder of one of Morristown's most respected families, the story of Antoine LeBlanc should have been over. But his public hanging on the town green was really just the beginning of a tale so gruesome that Morristonians still recoil at its telling 160 years after the incident. For it is said that the remains of Antoine LeBlanc may rest in pieces, to this day, amongst the treasured family heirlooms in some of the finest homes of New Jersey. LeBlanc, a French immigrant by way of Germany, arrived in New York in April of 1833. After 3 days in the New World, he was hired as a hand to work the family farm of Samuel Sayre of Morristown, NJ. In exchange for his hag-slopping and wood-chopping labors, LeBlanc was afforded a small room in the dank basement of the Sayre house, but no wages. He took his work orders from Mr. Sayre, his wife Sarah, and even the Sayre's household servant Phoebe, who was believed to have been a slave. Being the privileged son of a wealthy European family, this arrangement probably did not sit too well with the 31-year-old LeBlanc. It was about 2 weeks after he first started his menial chores on the Sayre farm that LeBlanc decided that he could suffer the indignity no longer. He began to plan his revenge. On the night of May 11th, LeBlanc returned to the Sayre house at about 10:30 p.m., after drinking at a local tavern. Faking distress, he summoned Samuel Sayre out to the stable, where he said that there was a problem with the horses. Carrying a candle, Mr. Sayre made his way out to the barn, where LeBlanc proceeded to smash in his employer's face with a shovel, splattering pieces of Sayre's brain all over his coat. The killer then repeated his ploy on Mrs. Sayre, finishing her off with a kick to the head from one of his heavy boots. After hiding the 2 bodies beneath the nearby pile of manure, LeBlanc made his way back to the main house, where he found Phoebe asleep in her bedroom on the 2nd floor. LeBlanc then caved in the unsuspecting girl's skull with a single blow from a club. After his murderous spree, LeBlanc frantically stuffed whatever household valuables he could into pillowcases and set off down the road on one of the Sayre's horses. In his haste to escape the scene of the crime, he unknowingly left a trail of stolen booty in the roadway that would later mark his route. On the morning that followed, Louis Halsey, a Sayre family friend, discovered some personal effects in the road which bore the monogram of Samuel Sayre. Fearing a robbery had taken place, a group of townsfolk decided to search the Sayre property. After the grisly discovery of the 3 murdered victims, Sheriff George Ludlow set off in pursuit of the killer. When he caught up with him, LeBlanc was sipping cider in the Mosquito Tavern in the Hackensack Meadows, a pouch of Sayre's possessions by his side. According to his subsequent jail cell confession, LeBlanc had stopped to rest en route to New York, where he planned to board a ship bound for Germany. Upon spotting Sheriff Ludlow, LeBlanc bolted for the back door of the tavern, but was easily apprehended and transported back to Morristown for prosecution. The trial of Antoine LeBlanc for the murders of the Sayre family began in courtroom number 1 of the Morris County Courthouse on August 13, 1833. After being afforded all of the formalities of a fair hearing, A jury took 20 minutes to find the defendant guilty. The next day, Judge Gabriel Ford handed down the sentence. LeBlanc was to be hanged by the neck until dead, and then be delivered to Dr. Isaac Canfield, a surgeon, for dissection. On the afternoon of September 6, LeBlanc stood atop the modern gallows erected on the village green for the occasion. This new device was designed to jerk the condemned man upward, rather than drop the floor out from beneath him like a conventional gallows. A crowd, estimated at between 10 and 12,000, had descended upon Morristown, greatly outnumbering the local population, which was about 2,500 at the time. The jeering mob, many of whom carried bag lunches, made their way into tall trees and onto nearby rooftops to get a better view of the execution. When the counterweight dropped, LeBlanc shot up in the air about 8 feet. His body twitched for about 2 minutes at the end of the rope, and then was still. Just over 4 months after first setting foot on American soil, Antoine LeBlanc's life was ended. But the truly barbaric story that still haunts Morristown to this day was just about to begin. It seems the good, God-fearing Presbyterian townsfolk were not content to let this murderous scoundrel get off so easy with just a mere hanging. They had some other, more creative ideas of what to do with this monster. First, LeBlanc's lifeless body was cut down from the gallows and whisked across the street to Dr. Canfield's office. Then, Drs. Canfield and Joseph Henry conducted some rather unorthodox medical experiments, using LeBlanc as their unwitting lab rat. Hooking the corpse up to a primitive battery, the doctors endeavored to prove a prevailing theory of the time, which linked electrical current and muscular motor impulses. Although unable to resurrect the dead man, the scientists reportedly got LeBlanc's eyes to roll around in his head, caused his limbs to tense somewhat, and even elicited a slight grin from his dead lips. Frankenstein's monster though, he was not. After the good doctors had completed their efforts to advance medical science, a death mask likeness of LeBlanc's face was cast in plaster. Then it was time to carve him up. LeBlanc's skin was peeled off and dispatched to the tannery on Washington Street to be fashioned into a variety of charming little keepsakes. A large number of wallets, purses, lampshades and book jackets were produced from the hair follicle-studded hide. Strips of skin were sold on the streets, each one personally signed by the Honorable Sheriff Ludlow to verify its authenticity. These gruesome little souvenirs reportedly found their way into many a respectable Morristown home, where, it is said, many still remain to this day. As the years passed, most of the residents of Morristown seemed content to let this dark episode of local justice slip quietly between the pages of the town's history. The story of Antoine LeBlanc, however, proved to be harder to kill than the man himself. Rumors concerning the whereabouts of LeBlanc's remains continued to circulate around the area long after the 1833 dissection. One such local legend was that Dr. Canfield had reassembled the executed man's skeleton to hang in his office. This myth was disproved, however, in 1893, when workers building an addition to the county clerk's office found LeBlanc's missing bones in a small wooden box in the bowels of the old building. Then, on Halloween night 1995, a startling discovery was made which confirmed many of the long-standing rumors concerning the survival of Antoine LeBlanc's epidermal artifacts in Morristown. While liquidating the estate of the late Carl Scherzer, workers from Dawson's auctioneers and appraisers of Morris Plains uncovered the glazed plaster death mask of Antoine LeBlanc stashed away in a box in Scherzer's basement. Soon after this grim discovery, a shriveled change purse made from what appeared to be human skin was found tucked away in an upstairs library of the same house. Scherzer, a retired surveyor and unofficial town historian, had evidently amassed quite a collection of 19th-century artifacts during his lifetime. After his death in 1979, the chore of sorting through his museum-like house fell upon the shoulders of his son Douglas, who in turn called Dawson's. The death mask of Antoine LeBlanc, along with the skin accessories, were put on display in a glass case at Dawson's, but were not offered for bidding to the packed house at the November 18th auction. After the display was dismantled, the LeBlanc trinkets were returned to the custody of the surviving Scherzer. when Weird NJ was invited by Douglas Scherzer, who was the chief of police of Morris Plains, to see the remains of Antoine LeBlanc, we jumped at the chance. In his office in the back of the police station he brought out a cardboard box and laid it on the table before us. Folding back the corrugated flaps of the package, he reached inside and unraveled a white towel to reveal the peaceful face of Antoine LeBlanc. As if merely sleeping, the delicate plaster eyelids of the death mask closed gently over gracefully intertwining lashes. The pronounced cheekbones sloped down to the broad, smooth lips, which betrayed no expression one way or another. The hollow plaster had seemed to be an almost perfect portrait of the dead man, until you noticed that both ears had been hacked off before the cast was made. Perhaps this was merely a way to ensure the easy removal of the mold from the corpse's head, or maybe the ears were just two more trinkets to be sold on the open market. Affixed to the shaved crown of the eggshell white cranium was a small paper tag which stated in 19th century script, Antoine LeBlanc, a Frenchman, murdered Judge Sayre and family, hanged in Morristown, NJ 1833. Then Chief Scherzer removed the remaining contents of the box. He pulled out a dusty old 8x10 picture frame that contained a small rectangular wallet. It was about 4.5 inches long, and a sickly greenish-brown in color. It folded over, and a tongue flap fit neatly into a slot on top to close it. I had never seen anything like it before. This was not the tough, yet supple hide of a cow or pig, which we are all familiar with. Nor was it the shiny, rough and scaly skin of a reptile. This was a thin and frail skin that should never have been tooled in such a manner. This skin was cracked and withered. This was the desiccated flesh of a human being. It was an inscription typed on a strip of paper that read, "A wallet made of human skin, allegedly that of Antoine LeBlanc." And so, it would seem, that reminders of this macabre episode in New Jersey history will continue to find their way into the consciousness of Morristownians. But what has become of the dozens of remaining souvenirs which were culled from the tanned hide of Antoine LeBlanc? We don't know. But don't be surprised if you bump elbows with the Weird NJ reporter the next time you're out canvassing garage sales in the Morristown area. For Antoine LeBlanc will undoubtedly rest in pieces scattered throughout that town for some time to come, and an old wallet, once a genuine hide, could turn out to be a real weird find.